Hello everyone! In this episode of my Dwarf Fortress Beginner's Guide, I'm going to walk you through getting your fort started. First, by digging some shelter for your dwarves, building your first few workshops, and among other things, to make sure your dwarves will not starve or go thirsty during your first winter. We're gonna continue where we left off last time, immediately after embarking on a new site. We're starting off with 7 dwarves, please hold your Disney jokes, and a bunch of supplies built into our wagon, which is the structure in the center of your screen. Right now your dwarves are outside, exposed to the elements and all sorts of potential danger. So your first job is to strike the earth and get your dwarves to dig themselves some safe shelter in the protective bosom of Mother Earth. Depending on the site you started in, you should have a cliff, hill, or a mountainside to dig into. For instance, if you look at my screen, you can actually see that there's a big sand wall that I'm going to have my dwarves dig into. In some situations, you may find yourself starting on a map that doesn't have a hill or a mountainside for you to dig into. In that case, you're going to have to approach this slightly differently, but I'll explain it as we go along. First off, press D twice. This brings up the Designations menu and immediately selects the mining option. Now you can select diggable squares for your dwarves to start mining into. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to designate a few rooms for our dwarves to dig, for our miner, because we only have one miner, to dig out. So I'm just gonna make this a room of this size. It's not important how big this room is, but you should keep in mind that this room that I'm making here right at the very start of my fort should be 5 squares times 5 squares. Now, alternatively, if your site doesn't have a mountain or a cliff for you to dig into, you can alternatively also press D and then press H to channel into the earth. This allows your dwarves to dig out squares directly into the ground. However, since I don't need to do that in this particular site, I'm just going to remove these designations, and we're going to be focusing on this area right here. At the same time, also order your woodcutter to chop down a few trees. Anywhere between 1 and 5 will suffice. You don't need that much wood starting out. This is done by pressing D followed by T. This allows you to select trees to be cut down. So I'm just selecting these 4 trees here, and as soon as my woodcutter has no jobs available, he'll cut down those trees. And next, we're going to make a wood stockpile next to the entrance of our fort, so our dwarves will have easy access to a few building materials. You can get into the stockpile menu by pressing P, followed by W to make a wood-specific stockpile. This means that as long as there are unattended logs anywhere on the map that aren't already stored by your dwarves and aren't currently in use, your dwarves will automatically haul them to the nearest wood stockpile. Now, for safety reasons, you may wish to turn off hunting and fishing on your dwarves. This is because dwarves that are hunting or fishing will be running around outside of the fort and exposing themselves to all sorts of danger. Later on, when you have a powerful military and defenses set up, you may be more willing to take that risk. But right now, it's probably for the best if you turn off those specific jobs. First, press the V key and then move the cursor onto whatever dwarf you want to look at, and press the P key followed by the L key. This allows you to see which labors a dwarf currently has active. Now we're going to be looking for the fishing labor. Fish cleaning is fine. And the hunting labor, if it's active. I don't think it's active on any of these dwarves. Oh, hang on, here's one. So this dwarf isn't going to be doing much of anything since he won't have any real jobs active. And you can give him whatever jobs you want later on. Or right now, it's completely up to you, really. But I don't want to expose him to danger right now, so I'm going to be focusing on building this first fort. Now that we have all our designations set up and all our jobs set up, we're going to unpause the game and allow my dwarves to go about their business. Now, as you can see, my miner is busy digging out all the squares I designated, while my woodcutter is busy chopping down the trees that I asked him to. Meanwhile, all the dwarves that currently don't have jobs are busy hauling the wood to my wood stockpile. Okay, here's one small problem where a tree has grown into the areas I'm trying to dig out, and that tree's roots are blocking my construction. So I'm going to cut down that tree in order to clear up those roots. And then let's see. Now you have to be careful because unfortunately cutting down trees that are above mined squares produce holes where the tree used to be, which can be a danger to your fort. As if you don't take care of those holes early on, invaders may be able to use them to path into your fort, or other dangerous animals can. So I'm just gonna let this run for a moment while my miner finishes digging out all these squares. Alright, now depending on how much solid rock there is on your map, this process may take longer or shorter, as miners will require more time to dig through solid rock than they would through sand. Now, don't worry too much about all the extra time your dwarves will need to cut through solid rock, because that extra bit of time is not going to kill your dwarves. At least, not right now anyway. Once your dwarves are done digging out those first few rooms, you can give your carpenter something to do by building a trade depot. You don't need one yet, but it's best to build one now so you don't forget later on when you really do need it. You can build a trade depot by first pressing B, followed by capital D. You can then place it here in this room that we cut out earlier, and then use one of the types of wood that we got earlier to construct it. It needs 3 logs to be constructed. Now you can alternatively also use stone to build it, but that typically takes a little longer because stone is much heavier than wood, which means that your mason will be spending a lot of time hauling stone back and forth simply because the stone is so heavy. Next, we're going to prepare a activity zone for our dwarves. And you do that by pressing I and then designating this area right here, one of the 2 big rooms that you dug out deeper in your fort, and then designating it as a meeting area. This means that your dwarves will no longer hang out outside on the fort in their spare time, but instead are going to spend time socializing in your new meeting zone. Next, we're going to prepare a general goods stockpile for our fort, a place where our dwarves can store all of the goods that they'll produce eventually. So first, Press P to get into the stockpile menu, and then press C to select the custom stockpile. Now we haven't configured our custom stockpiles yet, so let's do that first by pressing the T button. This allows us to turn on pretty much all the different settings of things that can and cannot be stored inside of this specific type of stockpile. So we're going to turn on animals. These were already turned on for me for some reason. Food, furniture, ammo, coins, bars and blocks, finished goods, weapons and trap components, armor and sheet. Now, and then we're going to designate this room here as our general goods stockpile. So now that we have that set up, we are going to go to our wagon right here and press Q, and then when the cursor is hovering over the wagon, press X. This will slate the wagon for removal. This will force your dwarves to break down the wagon and store all the goods that were inside the wagon in your new stockpile. This effectively moves pretty much everything your dwarves brought with them, including your dwarves themselves, into the safety of your new home, which will render your dwarves a lot safer from the likes of thieves and raiders and dangerous wildlife and such. Now, as you can see, my dwarves will now start breaking down the wagon and will start moving all the goods that they brought with them to this site into the fort itself. And as you can see, the trade depot has already been completed. Some of my animals are moving inside to the meeting area, which we'll fix later. That's not that big of a deal right now. They're free to stay there. My dwarves are starting to move all the goods inside. So now that our dwarves are safe and sound, we'll wrap up this episode. In the next episode, I'll discuss how to build a variety of workshops, what kind of things you can build with those workshops, and how to set up your first few necessities for your dwarves to have a comfortable existence in your fort within the first few months. Thank you all for watching. If you're still learning Dwarf Fortress, make sure you tune in for the next episode, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already.